welcome back to this week's episode of Outside the Arena. I'm Griffin Zedek alongside Devin Bernstein, and it's Super Bowl week. It is a big game. You'll either be, I'm not 100% sure if this will come out on the day of the Super Bowl. I think I'll try to get it out today. So you're either watching this on day before the Super Bowl, day of the Super Bowl, but very exciting. We got the Chiefs and Niners. They've been, in Vegas all week. It's kind of been fun seeing the whole media scene as always, especially in Vegas. There's been a lot going on just in general. So there's that going on. We had the NBA trade deadline this week. Pitchers and catchers starting to report. So a very exciting time in sports for sure. UFC pay-per-view next week. So a lot to look forward to. So we're obviously going to start with the Super Bowl, though. Chiefs Niners, biggest game of the year. There's all the storylines in the world. But starting things off, we'll dive kind of deep into this one. One thing that I think, we're interested in coming off that Lions game where I believe the Niners allowed, I think it was 182 rushing yards to the Lions. Pretty rough. And Isaiah Pacheco is running behind a pretty good Chiefs offensive line. Devin, how do you think he's going to impact this game? Do you think he'll have a big game? And ultimately, because it seems like when he's on, it's really tough to stop this Chiefs offense.
Yeah, I mean, the more I've gotten into this matchup, the more I've thought to myself that the Chiefs offense, passing wise, is kind of going to be what it's going to be. I think Mahomes is going to, find a lot of quick throws to Kelsey and Rashee Rice. They'll take a deep shot or two to MVS. It'll be interesting to see if Tony, gets a touch or two. I probably doubt it, but we never know with the Chiefs. And also he was a huge part in them winning the Super Bowl last year. So there's also a chance that he could, make a play because he is a talented guy, but obviously has really struggled. But yeah, back to Pacheco, it just feels like this is going to be the big X factor for the Chiefs on offense. Like you said, the Niners rush defense gave up a ton of yards to a great Lions rushing attack. But it doesn't mean that they're just like a good run defense who just had a bad day. They also struggled against the Packers. It's been something they've struggled with throughout the year. Even when they played against the Eagles had some success running the football against them, if I remember correctly. And this Niners defense is extremely talented, and they haven't quite performed overall to the level we probably would have expected them to in the playoffs, just given the amount of talent they have. And I think the main two things you look at are probably the coaching and the run defense. And the coaching, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure like everything that they're doing differently as opposed to what they were doing with DeMeco Ryans and Robert Saleh. But I do know that those are two head coaches in the NFL, one of which almost won Coach of the Year. And the other one is a very good defensive mind, in my opinion, even if he has some question marks as a head coach. But again, it's like the defense doesn't seem as well coached, and they've really, really struggled against the run. And I think the big reason for that is they don't really play a traditional nose tackle. Most of their interior defensive linemen are pass rushing types. Obviously, the main one that comes to mind is an Arik Armstead, who's really a unique build. He's like 6'7", 300 pounds, almost built more like an oversized edge rusher in a way. And although he is a very talented player, he gets after the passer, he's good in run defense, with his weird build, it's possible for him to kind of just get shoved off the line and moved really easily. And you could say a similar thing about Javon Hargrave, former Eagle, who had some great years there, is a great pass rusher. Don't get me wrong. He's a guy who could make a big impact in this game, especially with a Joe Thuney out. But he's also a guy, he has a bit of a weird build. He's shorter. He's like 6 foot even and about 310 pounds. So he also can kind of get,
Build.
that's a build for sure. Yeah. He also can kind of get bowled off the ball a little bit. They also play Javon Kinlaw, first round pick, who's actually been pretty good in a contract year when healthy. But he also struggles against the run, more so with his like discipline and awareness of certain situations. So I'm really concerned about this interior of the Niners defensive line. I just think Pacheco could have a huge game. Despite Thuney being out, I still give the pretty heavy advantage to the Chiefs interior offensive line as opposed to the Niners interior defensive line. And I just think Pacheco is a really good player. Like, obviously, he's kind of a meme for how he runs, but like he does run really hard and he's also really fast and powerful. combining that with like pretty good vision, awareness, instincts, moves, whatever else that a running back needs. He's a really good player. So I think that's going to be the first main X factor in this game that we want to talk about. But what are your thoughts on this Chiefs running game against the Niners interior defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge for them. I got a little stat here for us. So Kansas City, when Isaiah Pacheco runs for 50 or more yards, is 17-3. When he runs for less than 50 yards, they are 6-5. So, I mean, just from that alone, you can tell kind of how important he is. I don't think that includes playoffs, by the way. I think that was I pulled this from StatMuse and it doesn't look like the playoff games from this year up there, but yeah, I think he is so huge to this offense, and I think the way San Francisco has looked so far in the playoffs, they've been susceptible to the run. I mean, their defense as a whole has been a huge issue. I mean, they've really gotten off to a lot of slow starts. They've kind of come together a little in the second half, but with games. But you know, if they come out that slow against Kansas City, like they're toast at the end of the day. Like this Kansas City defense is by far the best defense they've played in the playoffs. They're not going to let them go for, in that Lions game, they went for 27 points in the second half. Like that's just not going to happen. They'll be lucky to get 27 in the entire game. So they got to start, allow the big explosive plays. And Pacheco is huge. I mean, when he does well, it feels like this Kansas City offense really gets in a groove. First down is just so big for them. Setting up those second and short, second and mediums with a guy like Mahomes who comfortable using his legs, and that's kind of where a range where Travis Kelsey thrives. Just avoiding those third down and long. That's a key, and Isaiah Pacheco is a key piece of a reason why they've been so successful in not getting in those situations, just running the ball early and establishing the clock, establishing the run and controlling the clock. I think is the key for them. Keep the ball out of the Niners offense hands. Don't let them get in a groove and just do your thing. And Pacheco's a huge part of that. You covered I think the Niners matchup wise pretty well. I don't think I really got anything more to say to that. But the Niners are going to have to get creative and they're going to have to put pressure on Mahomes. The Joe Thuney being out last time, I forget the guy, the name of the guard who stepped in his place, but he played pretty well. But try to take advantage of that, switch Bosa in a little bit, get him moving, and trying to get him on that left guard. You got to do some creative things, I think, to put pressure on Mahomes because if you don't rush the passer or stop the run, it's going to be a long day for San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying ahead of the chains will be a big key for the Chiefs. Like you said, like getting to a third and medium, third and short is so dangerous for the Chiefs. Because of their limited deep passing attack. But once they don't need that many yards, it becomes way harder to stop them, especially like you said, with Mahomes' legs. Another X factor we want to talk about is kind of the matchup of the star of the show for the Chiefs on defense, which is Chris Jones. Going against this Niners interior offensive line, which certainly has done its part, certainly has been good enough. But just in terms of how this team is built, like where the assets are allocated, it's almost entirely to the playmakers, to the left tackle, Trent Williams, and to the defense. So for the most part, the rest of the four guys on this offensive line who will all be matched up with Chris Jones at some point throughout this game, with the way they move Chris Jones around, between the edge, the interior, left side, right side, whatever. They'll move Chris Jones around, so he'll get all these different matchups, get a chance to get a few looks at these guys, and I just think there's a chance that he could really be a game wrecker here. Obviously Trent Williams is going to move people. He's going to be great on screens. He's going to be great on outside handoffs. He's going to be great in pass protection. He's one of the best players in football. He's going to be great. But again, you look at the rest of this offensive line. You have, an Aaron Banks, who was a second round pick, hasn't been very good. You have John Feliciano, who my Giants friends will tell you he is not a very good player. I think you've got like a Colton McKivitz, who's a fifth round pick out of West Virginia. He's okay, but again, it's a fifth round pick like from a few
Yeah.
years ago. He's kind of a replacement level guy. It's just like you wonder if there's gonna be some issues in terms of getting Brock Purdy time. And what we saw with against the Lions was that when he had time, he was able to make throws. He got a little bit lucky, but he still made some great plays. And then also with the feet. And it's going to be a lot harder for him to make plays with his feet, in particular, if Chris Jones is bearing down his neck. I mean, Brock Purdy's he's your classic like sneaky athletic white quarterback, but at the same time, like he doesn't run in like the four
Yeah.
sixes. Like physically, he's not going to be able to outrun some of these freaks on the Chiefs defense, Nick Bolton. Another thing with the Chiefs defensive line that I will say is Charlie Omena, who is going to be out. He tore his ACL, so he's probably been like their second or third best piece on that D line. And, him and Karlaftis have been really good as kind of big bodied edge rushers. So that could be a loss for the Chiefs, but ultimately I think Chris Jones is, as always, going to be a huge factor in this game. And I'm just interested to see, if the Niners are just going to say, we're going to double you every play, or they're going to say, Chris Jones is going to do what he does, but we're not going to change our entire offense because of that. And I could understand both sides of the argument. It's just going to be interesting to see what they do. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup.
Yeah. I was curious. I mean, this isn't indicative of, sacks aren't indicative of everything, but I was just curious how many playoff sacks he has. And he only has 2.5, Chris Jones, which is kind of crazy to think
And
about for how many
and I
playoff games
believe
he
they
played.
were all last year.
He had half a sack this year, but yeah,
Okay.
two of them were last year. Yeah, you were on it. But that that doesn't represent everything. I think you covered it pretty well. It's going to be a matchup where the Chiefs definitely got to take advantage, and Spags loves to bring pressure. I mean, that's a staple of his defense. So he's going to mix looks up, have safeties, blitzing. He's going to have linebackers blitzing. They're that's what Spags does at the end of the day. So yeah, San Francisco's got to be ready to play. Obviously, you've got the big boy and Trent Williams at left tackle. So that's going to be a spot where Purdy's blind side should be pretty safe. But like you said, that interior is definitely susceptible, and that's where the Chiefs can kind of cause some chaos and make things happen and get Purdy uncomfortable because when he is uncomfortable or just feeling the pressure, he's still a young quarterback. As much college experience as he has, as great as he's been in the NFL, in the big moments, not that he's had too many terrible mistakes in the NFL, but he's had those moments where he gets under pressure and kind of makes a bad decision, bad pass. So that's what the Chiefs got to do. They got to force him into that. He's unfortunately for the Chiefs got all the weapons in the world to get open, which aids you a lot. And I think we saw with the legs last week that was something we haven't really seen too much from him. So at least he showed that if he needs to, he can kind of use the legs in a big way. But yeah, I think the Chiefs are they love to bring pressure. That's not going to stop, and it'll be interesting to see how that works because they love trusting their corners too. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, two of the better cornerbacks in the entire NFL. They've got immense trust in those guys to run a fucking I don't even excuse my language. I'm trying to think of the different. Is it cover zero when they just
Yeah.
when they
When they send
yeah.
everyone, yeah.
Yeah, cover zero. So they've got faith to pull that out of the playbook. So I'm rambling on. I'm trying to get too technical for my expertise, but yeah, I think the D line matchup would be interesting, and ultimately, I think the run game is also we talked about it with the Chiefs, but the 49ers. I mean, when Christian McCaffrey gets going, it kind of feels like game over sometimes, and I'm actually curious. I feel like he's been fine in the playoffs. I don't think he's really had a huge game. I might be wrong though. So let me see. Yeah, I mean,
I don't
last game
think,
was pretty
yeah.
good. 90 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, like 132 yards for scrimmage. So
Nice.
he's going to be a key factor. And look, if Kansas City shuts him down and makes Brock Purdy, be the one to win him, I think Kansas City is going to be hoisting the Lombardi. So, as much pressure as they should apply on passing situations, stopping the run, and that's where Chris Jones honestly is best. So, I think that's if anything, like we mentioned, like not that many sacks, but if this guy can aid them in stopping the run, stopping McCaffrey and stuff as that is, I mean, that is game changing, and that's what Chris Jones does.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't touch on the run defense as much, but you're absolutely right there. I think that's another big thing is like, can Chris Jones play 80% of the snaps and dominate in the run game? You know, like he's able to, is another thing, especially against, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Shanahan, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. I mean, these are some great run game weapons. Even Debo,
Yeah.
I expect to get some carries, which I said a couple weeks ago, and he got like one carry, which was surprising. It's like 3 years
Yeah.
ago, they would run into him like 12
They
times a game.
fed
I
it.
mean,
Well, once they started that year, oh my God, it was like I mean, he went. It was. I mean, rightfully so. He basically ran for a touchdown like every play,
Every
every
game.
time he had it. I mean, that year. Debo was unstoppable, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that was special. So I guess that's another small thing that's like, oh, are they gonna run it with Debo in
Yeah,
obviously
they.
a huge game, which will be interesting to see. Finally, this last, kind of matchup we want to talk about does include Debo as well, is we want to talk about how these Chiefs corners who are really good are going to match up, how they're going to play, what kind of style they're going to be looking for against these Niners playmakers. Looking at L'Jarius Sneed, he's kind of your typical, outside lock up your number one receiver type corner. But, you look at the Niners, it's like, what's the perfect matchup for him? Like, I theoretically it's Ayuk, but Debo is the guy who is probably the bigger like game changer, bigger big play threat. So I guess that'll just be interesting to see like if they want to line up Snead against Ayuk as much as they can, or whoever it is between Ayuk and Samuel, or they don't care at all, or whatever. That'll be interesting to see. And then their other really good corner, Trent McDuffie, is a guy who spends a lot of time on the inside, kind of blitzes a lot. He'll drop into zone coverage. He'll guard a tight end. Sometimes he'll match up against a running back. Kind of does whatever Spags needs him to do in this defense. Also, a really talented player, can play on the outside. I would be, interested to see if they're going to put him on the outside when both Debo and Ayuk line up on the outside, just for better matchups, regardless of whether it's Snead on Ayuk or whoever on whoever. So, there's just a lot of different things that Spags can do. There's a lot of things Shanahan can do. He can motion one guy in from the slot, motion one guy out of the slot, whatever it is, he can do a lot of things to get the matchups he wants. I guess, a small X factor here who always seems to make at least one third down catch is Jawan Jennings. Like, he just always seems to make like it's like a
Yeah.
3rd and 7, and Debo is double covered, and Ayuk can't get open, and Kittle is in blocking, and McCaffrey short of the sticks, and it's like, oh, Jawan Jennings 17-yard completion. Like, yep, he's just like
There it
kind of
is.
the perfect like last target in an offense. He's a good blocker, big body. So I could, obviously the Chiefs after their second corner really starts to go down in terms of skill. So, on those important plays where maybe they're matching up their top two corners on the top two receivers, maybe we see some Jawan Jennings. Um, I'm interested to see if they put McDuffie on Kittle at all. Obviously a size mismatch, but he might just be their best chance because even like a Nick Bolton is, 4 or 5 inches shorter, 20 pounds lighter than a George Kittle. So, you just want the stickier coverage player, and you can put Bolton somewhere else. Maybe you want to do that sometimes. It depends. Oh, that also depends on how much Kittle is in the game plan as a pass catcher, which seems to vary pretty reasonably week to week. Like sometimes they just are like, all right, well, you're just going to be our second left
Yeah.
tackle this week, and it's awesome. And then sometimes they're like, oh, you can, catch 100 passes every year if we wanted you to. Side note, I do think George Kittle is probably the best tight end in the NFL. As good as Kelsey is, I think I take Kittle's all around game and unselfishness and like lack of needing targets to make an impact on the game. I do think I would maybe take Kittle at this point in their careers, which is obviously huge props to Kittle because Kelsey is either the first or second best tight end of all time, in my opinion. So I just think Kittle's playing at an incredible level, even if he doesn't catch 100 yards, 10 catches as often as Kelsey.
Yeah.
He's also impossible to tackle, like a freaking freight train. But yeah, I've babbled on for a while here. It's just going to be interesting to see the matchup between the Chiefs secondary and the Niners playmakers. Obviously, two really strong points of these teams. Justin Reed, also a pretty good safety. He can play some corner, so maybe they put him in the slot and McDuffie on the outside. I don't know. There's a lot of things the Chiefs can do. I'm just very interested. I'm very excited for the Super Bowl for those who can't tell. I just think this is going to be a great football game. So I'm really excited for all these matchups. And what are your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah. I mean, I think you covered it well. McDuffie and Sneed, both really good. Like you said, McDuffie, I mean, he was first team all pro, right? I think. I think he was
I think
for a
so,
slot
yeah.
corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if they keep him in the slot. I mean that, you know, I guess Debo kind of plays out of the slot sometimes a good bit, so kind of works with that matchup. Obviously, Ayuk on the outside wouldn't surprise me if Snead maybe shadows him for most of the game. I think that just makes sense logically. But like you said, like it. having the two of them, it kind of makes it a little easier to just stick to your game plan and just, let whoever's on that side guard, whoever, the Niners send out there. Um, you mentioned Justin Reed. I think the safeties are pretty big in this one. Justin Reed, not just him, but Mike Edwards, Deion Bush had that big interception in the Ravens game. You know, this Niners team can be very explosive. You mentioned Kittle, you mentioned Debo, obviously Ayuk, and it's that second level. And that's where the safeties are coming to play. Also the linebackers. I mean, not letting, you know, guys like George Kittle and Debo get wide open over the middle, because that's where, San Francisco loves to get the ball right over the middle and let guys like Debo work, because he's one of the best players, if not the best wide receiver after the catch in the entire NFL. So, it's just about stopping that. And I know Spags loves to blitz, send some guys, but just being careful, because you make one mistake and the 49ers will rip your secondary apart just like that. So I think the safeties are huge in just preventing the big play, and make sure they're dropping back and not pressing too much, because once they get a guy like Debo or a Kittle over the top, you're in big trouble. So yeah, I mean, I think the safeties are almost more important in this one, weirdly enough, than the corners. But I think the corners, I mean, it's a great matchup wise, just like, for the fans. I mean, just seeing two of the best go against, two of the best corners go against two of the best wide receivers. You also mix in Kittle, obviously, in there. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think both sides will have success. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm really excited like you, Dev. I think there's so much in these games, so much star power, obviously, on the Niners. And then you've got, the inevitability of Patrick Mahomes on the other side with Travis Kelsey. You've got the Taylor Swift storyline. I mean, it is going to be the most watched Super Bowl of all time. It's in Vegas. I mean, it just feels right. So I'm happy. I think this is a better matchup too. Like, the Lions would have been great. It would have been a fun story, but this game just feels right for Vegas and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of what I got on that matchup. I think, just to recap, corners, I don't think it'll vary too much. It wouldn't surprise me if they try to keep McDuffie in the slot, but safeties are going to be very important for just limiting the big plays and just not letting the ball hit off their helmet and go into Brandon Ayuk's hands would probably be a good start as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm ready to get into game predictions if you are. Um, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I
definitely.
think I think this feels like every NFL game, but it feels like the higher level of play we get, we just get the valuation of each possession like mattering more. It just feels like the NFL has shifted to a lot of like safer defenses in general. Not to say teams won't be aggressive, but what I mean by that is teams are more willing to say, all right, take a 12 play drive as opposed to a 3-and-out or a big play touchdown. And it just feels like big plays are less likely than they used to be, and long drives are more likely than they used to be. So I say that to get to my point, which is that I think while both offenses might be pretty effective, pretty efficient, I don't think either team puts up a ton of points here. I don't think we see the Niners get 3 big play touchdowns and they put up 35 points, and Mahomes keeps just dragging them back and they put up 31 or something. Like, I just don't see it being a hyper shootout, even if the offenses play pretty well. And my second point is that the Chiefs defense is really freaking good. So if any team is going to be able to really shut down this Niners offense, hold them to like 17 points or something like that, I really could see it being the Chiefs. Um, I think the Chiefs are going to be able to get going early. They probably, it seems like in the playoffs, those first 10 to 15 scripted plays, they have just been incredible. I
Yeah.
expect that to continue. Again, the Chiefs offense has struggled in the second half in these playoffs. I kind of expect that to continue. I expect them to, maybe score 10, 14 points in the first half, maybe even 17 or 20. And then the Niners make some adjustments. The script isn't, as advantageous the second time. For the offense, they're not able to maybe they don't score a touchdown the first drive, whatever it is. I think they maybe slow down a little bit in the second half. And I think the Niners offense gets going a little bit in the second half. However, I do think the Chiefs will probably be up through most of this game. I think that's not the best sign for the Niners. Not to say that they can't come back. They've done it in both playoff games, even though that's been like rare in the Shanahan era. Um, So it's not that I don't think they can come back. I just think it's going to be really hard to come back against a
Yeah.
team that's in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes in a top, 3 to 5 defense. So I do lean Chiefs here. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I just don't think the talent gap outside of quarterback is big enough to justify the advantage in quarterback. And, they have even more big game experience. We saw in the championship games, especially the Niners Lions game. And obviously, the Niners were the team that had the experience in that one. But that was a big advantage for them, just having been there, not freaking out when they were down, as opposed to the Lions, who I'm sure were really, really freaking out when they had given up, 17 straight points to the 1 seed on the road. And they probably, were at some point thinking, wow, we're going to blow this Niners team out and go to the Super Bowl. So that's obviously a big shell shock. So I expect if anything like that happens, I'd give, the advantage to recover to the Chiefs. Score prediction, I'll say I'm thinking 23-20. Um, I think the Chiefs maybe get 2 touchdowns of their first 3 drives, something like that, and then they're mostly settling for field goals rest of the game. And then, the Niners offense, maybe they score 6 in the first half and they get 2 touchdowns in the second half, something like that. I'm thinking about this a little bit too deeply, but I just think something like that where the Chiefs are up most of the game. The Niners kind of fight their way back in it. Maybe it's 20-20 and Mahomes goes and leads a field goal drive as time expires. So that'll be my official prediction. But I would say Chiefs in a relatively medium scoring, pretty close game would be my prediction.
Yeah. I guess we'll find out if this outside the arena curse is real. I'm going with the Chiefs as well. Kind of just a gut feeling. Like I think, you know, the Niners are probably got the more talented team, but man, Patrick Mahomes is just he's just special. I mean, I don't want to ramble on about him, but you know, the plays he makes, I just think this is a guy who's been in the big moment. You know, he's done this year in and year out. It's like Brady, you know, it's just the guy's been there before. Brock Purdy is, you know, I think he's a great quarterback. Guy has not played in a big game like this. You know, the playoff games he played were basically at home last year in Philly. I know he really didn't get to play that much, but you know, wasn't like I mean I don't know. That was such a small sample size. He got pretty hurt pretty early, so I don't want to look
Yeah.
at that. But you know, I think it'll be a majority Niners fan base, but just the whole week, I think of you know the Super Bowl and whatnot. You know, someone like Mahomes, I think is going to be better built for it, and you know, just ready to play than someone like Purdy. But at the same point, you got CMC in there. It's such a tough matchup to predict. I just think Mahomes ultimately will get it done. I think the Chiefs are going to be able to run the football, and I think when they run the football, they're a very tough team to beat. I think Pacheco is going to have a huge game. And I think Travis Kelce is built for the moment at the end of the day. I think he's going to have a touchdown in there. He's just come alive in these playoffs. I mean, he's been looked like his old self in these playoffs, and that's so big for this team. Rasheed Rice has been a great piece. Like, I don't know. I think Patrick Mahomes at the end of the day is too good. I think the Niners defense has been a disaster. And I think against a team like that, Kansas City will be able to start kind of hot. And, you know, I think in the Super Bowl, they've had a week off. I think they'll be fresh. Same with the Niners. I mean, that's not like a, you know, oh, the Chiefs are more fresh, but just like, you know, they're gonna be ready to go. And you give Andy Reid, both of these coaches, you give them an extra week. I mean, we are gonna be seeing some probably crazy shit to be honest in terms of some of these plays. Um, but yeah, I think Andy Reid, you know, he's just a master at it, man. Shanahan's trying to get on the board. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I think Chiefs win close, like you said. I'm gonna go 28 for Kansas City, and I'm gonna go 22 for San Fran, something like that. 28-22. I don't know. I think it'll be a really close game. Um, it's just kind of a gut. I don't know. I feel like you know, we kind of win in depth, but I don't know. It's just kind of a gut feeling. I think Pacheco ultimately runs the football well, and Pat Mahomes gets it done with, you know, a guy like Kelsey. So both going Chiefs. We'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we'll know if it's a curse for sure. If the
Yeah,
Niners,
this is the
blow them
true
out.
test.
This is the truth.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, so if we want to get into some NBA trade deadline moves,
Yep.
so there weren't a ton of huge moves, but just a couple that I want to touch on. So first of all, the Mavericks acquired two, main rotational players. They acquired PJ Washington and 2 second-round picks from the Hornets in exchange for Grant Williams, who they signed to a 4-year deal this offseason, been pretty disappointing. Seth Curry to make the money match, and a 2027 first-round pick. Yeah, I think PJ Washington is kind of the ideal player you'd like next to Luka and Kyrie, a big wing who can put it on the floor, he can shoot, he can defend a couple positions, kind of a do-it-all, master of none guy. Not very efficient this year in Charlotte, but who's going to be efficient in Charlotte? I mean, yeah, I mean, he's shown basically to be a good or at least decent NBA player at pretty much everything. So I think he's going to come in, help them, give them some big wing minutes, maybe some small ball five. Kind of just play the Grant Williams role, but do it better. I know they were really hopeful for Grant Williams to be a big piece of what they wanted to do because he's in theory the type of player you want next to Luka and Kyrie as well, but just didn't work out. And I guess they decided that just it wasn't worth trying to relinquish the asset, try to figure it out with Grant Williams, tried to trade him and get an upgrade right now, which I certainly understand with a lot of, time pressure under, just having such a great player like Luka who could at any point, say, wait, I'm way too good for this situation. And then they also acquired Daniel Gafford. Let me get the trade details up for that one. This was for Rashawn Holmes, who doesn't play just to make the money work, and the 2024 first-round pick via the Thunder, which I don't know how they have that pick, but they do. So I guess the Wizards will be getting a late 20s pick there. It makes sense for them. They're rebuilding. Didn't really touch on the Hornets, but same for them. Makes sense. They're rebuilding, get a pick, whatever. But what I will say is Daniel Gafford really is a guy who can put a ton of pressure on the rim. I was watching their game earlier against the Thunder. They're up in the first game with these two players, pretty big, having a good showing. But besides that, they were saying that Daniel Gafford, half of his career shots are dunks, which is so ridiculous.
That's crazy.
But we just haven't, obviously Derek Lively, the rookie out of Duke, has been pretty good as a starting center, but you just get another guy who can come play that Derek Lively role, he's done it so well. They really didn't have a true backup five that could play that role, or at least not at that level, because Dwight Powell kind of sucks, to be honest. So, you just get another upgrade there. You get more bodies. You have a 10 to 11 man rotation that looks like guys that I'm like, oh, I could play this guy 20 minutes if he needs to, which is always something you kind of are looking for. You have shooting. You have one of the best players in the world in Luka, who could have a great playoff run at any given moment, as he has. He's been incredible in the playoffs in his young career. So I'm really high on the Mavericks after this trade deadline. Just feels like they got some more good pieces, some more good fits. Who cares about the picks? They're going to be picking the 20s with Luka anyway. They have some young players anyway that they're trying to develop. So I'm really fine with giving up a couple picks here. I'm really liking the direction of this Mavs team. And for all the talk about Kyrie, I think it's worth noting that in the playoffs, if you just have a guy that can be a really efficient, good scorer, and even if the rest of his game doesn't help you that much, it almost doesn't matter with how hard it gets to score in the playoffs compared to the regular season. Like if you can replicate, 90% of your scoring efficiency and volume in the playoffs, it almost doesn't matter how good you are at the rest of your game. You're going to be a really valuable player to your team. And I think Kyrie will be able to do that. So I'm really liking what the Mavs are doing. Next trade I want to touch on, my 76ers trading Furkan Korkmaz, who finally gets, after 6 years of requesting a trade, finally gets out of Philly and then is immediately waived. Sucks for him. I have a Furkan Korkmaz jersey. I hope he comes back or something. We figure out how to get Korkmaz back on the team. Just a good guy, but yeah, a bit over his head with what he thinks his value is in the NBA. But anyway, the Sixers traded Marcus Morris and Korkmaz, 3 second-round picks and cash considerations for Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is already like top 10 all time in 3-pointers made or something ridiculous. He's been in the league for like 9 years. Just goes to show obviously how modern basketball has completely changed. But you got a guy in Hield who can really put up buckets. He can score. He's improved as a passer. He's improved. He's just a really good offensive player, and that's something the Sixers really need, be it as a starter, with a lot of the injuries they have now. But I assume when the team is fully healthy, he'll probably be the sixth man, but someone who plays 25 plus minutes. Didn't this team didn't really have a known, he's just a knockdown shooter type guy besides Maxey, who's obviously so much more than just that. So you get a guy who's just a great shooter. Embiid always has worked great with shooters, be it, Seth Curry, JJ Redick earlier in his career, or even minutes with Korkmaz. I swear to God, he makes Korkmaz look like a competent NBA player. You get Embiid shooting, you got stars shooting, but especially a guy like Embiid, you get him shooting, and that's a really good recipe for a great offense. You've got four guys who could realistically give you 20 on any given night, which is something that's really important. But obviously, this trade really doesn't matter unless Joel Embiid gets back healthy. So you don't want to speculate on that because it's really just a guess of whether he'll be able to. So ultimately, the way I see this trade is the Sixers didn't give up too much. They didn't give up any first round picks. Buddy Hield is an expiring contract, so they can still have as much cap space as they would have going into the offseason. And if it works out, you re-sign him on probably not a huge deal just to be your shooter, play 25 minutes a game, hit 4 threes, whatever, do his job. And if not, you let him go and you still have the same cap space and you're just minus a couple of second round picks, which really isn't a huge deal. So I really like this trade for the Sixers. For the Pacers, I guess it's kind of an admission that they're probably a year away just to, trade a guy who's on an expiring contract and they didn't want to pay. If you really thought you were a contending team, you probably keep that guy because of the value he could give you this season. I don't disagree with that. I just think some people maybe would be a bit surprised to hear that. I still am really high on the Pacers. I just think there's a few too many good teams in the East for them to be a serious, maybe they could win a round. I don't see them really competing in the second round quite yet. So I get this trade for them, get some picks, get some money, whatever. The Spurs also got Marcus Morris. The Pacers got back Doug McDermott. I don't really know what that does for either team. I'm not going to touch on that. Quickly on the Suns, they were able to add Nets wing Royce O'Neal and David Roddy for a 2026 first-round pick swap, Chimezi Metu and Yuta Watanabe. They also sent Keita Bates-Diop and Jordan Goodwin to the Nets and 3 future second-round picks to the Nets as well. So they are like completely out of picks. Like I don't think they can trade any second-round picks, any pick swaps, anything. But that's okay because you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker playing really well. Bradley Beal started figuring it out. And I'm really starting to get, confident that they have a few other guys that can play big minutes for them. Royce O'Neal's your token 3-and-D wing. He's for your token 3-and-D wing, a really, really good passer. He can, kind of make some plays if, say KD gets doubled and he's the guy that gets left open, sort of in that Draymond Green type role we saw at the Warriors all those years. He can make plays out of that. He can shoot. He can defend multiple positions. I really, really like this addition. Now you look at the Suns, it's like you're probably still starting, Beal, Allen, who's been really good, Booker, Durant, and Nurkic. But then off the bench, you've got Eric Gordon, Royce O'Neal, Drew Eubanks, who's been pretty good. Maybe David Roddy can give them some good minutes. So what looked like a team that was really, really top heavy, and it still is a team that's found, I think, 4 other guys who can play 25 plus minutes in the playoffs and not be a big minus on either end of the court, which is just such a big thing when you have 3 great players. I'm really, scared. I don't know what teams are going to do with this offense, like, especially once they go to like KD at the 5. Like, if they're running a lineup of, say, Booker, Beal, Gordon or Allen, Royce O'Neal, and Durant, like no one can't shoot, no one can't really defend. You're a little small, but like in short bursts, that just feels like such a great lineup. So I'm really excited to see how the Suns look. I was very low on them earlier in the year, but I've kind of completely come back around. I think they are kind of a sleeping giant in a loaded Western Conference. Moving on, the Thunder at Gordon Hayward from the Hornets. They trade Vasily Micic, who they signed from Europe, hadn't really worked out for them. Trey Mann, former first-round pick, hadn't really worked out. Davis Bertans expiring salary and 2 second-round picks. There might have been some other stuff involved in this deal that came out later, but nothing really of relevance. Gordon Hayward still going to be out until past the All-Star break. Obviously, that's the main thing with him is the injuries and the age, but when he's healthy, he's a really good do it all type wing, gives them some size that they didn't really have at the wing position, gives them some flexibility to maybe, put Josh Giddey off the bench, who's really struggled for them at times, especially as a shooter. It just gives them more versatility. I really like this addition. A lot of people wanted to see them get some more like rebounding, some big depth, but that's just not the type of team they are. They're committed to being a small, we're playing Chet at the five, and if not, we're putting, another small center on the court. And that's just who they are. They're not going to be the best rebounding team. They're not going to be, the best team against a Jokic or an Embiid, but they're going to be really fast. They're going to, do all the things that are advantageous for a small team. It's just kind of their style. And I feel like you want to add guys that fit that style more than change the style because that's really risky, especially when you're so ahead of schedule. Like, I just don't see the point of trading for like a center that doesn't shoot that could completely mess up your spacing if it, doesn't go well. So I get why they didn't do that. Moving on to some more trades. Probably the biggest one left. We have the Knicks trading back for Alec Burks and for Bojan Bogdanovic, only giving up Evan Fournier's expiring deal, Malachi Flynn's expiring deal, Ryan Arcidiacono, which is sad because of all the Nova players on the team that he's friends with. He's made a lot of money in the NBA, so good for him. And then Quentin Grimes, 2 second-round picks and cash consideration. So I think Bogdanovic in a nutshell probably was worth about a first round pick, which is about what you're seeing from Grimes and the 2 second-round picks. I would say that's about a first round pick of value. And then you kind of basically just got Burks for free. And now it's like you have a lot of things you can do. You have more scoring, you have more shooting, you have more depth. You don't really have to rely on Randall as much anymore because you have a Bogdanovic who's a 20 point per game scorer. You have a Anunoby who's a 15 point per game scorer. So you don't really need as much scoring from Randall. Obviously, if he's playing great, great. But if he's not being himself in the playoffs, which is a big worry for this Knicks team, it's not going to kill them as much, especially with the level Brunson's playing at. Still doesn't kill them defensively. I don't think either of these guys are great or horrible defensively. They're pretty smart. They're going to do what Tiz wants them to do. I don't think they kill them defensively. I still think the Knicks are a good defensive team. So I really like this trade for the Knicks. I think they're kind of a sleeping giant in the East. I think I'd have them as my second best team in the East right now. Probably ahead of the Bucks. I just really haven't liked how they looked.
Cleveland ahead of Cleveland.
Maybe not Cleveland. Cleveland's playing really well too. I'm excited to see how the East plays out, like what the matchups are, if Embiid's healthy, who ends up at what seed. That's going to be interesting to see. The Cavs are playing really, really well. I do want to touch on
Yeah.
them quickly. Just integrating Mobley and Garland back in the lineup hasn't been an issue. They're great on both ends. Jared Allen's been great. Donovan Mitchell's playing. He just gets like 2% better every year, I feel like, and
Yeah.
over time it adds up, and he's just become, I mean, he came in the league as a really, really good player, and he's just gotten a little better every year. And now, he's such a complete player. He's, got a pretty big body in terms of defensively. He's like a 6'10" wingspan guy, even though he's only 6'1", 6'2". So confident that he can, maybe make some defensive improvements. Strus's shooting has been huge. They've gotten, some uh some contributions, that's the word, from, a Sam Merrill, a George Niang, Karis LeVert can get you some buckets. So I'm liking what the Cavs are doing. I still think you have to ask the question of how many guys are clearly good players on both ends of the floor. And I really think the only guy that's like definitely good on both ends of the floor is Jared Allen. Like Mitchell and Garland have had some troubles on defense. They're also just smaller guards. Like they're always going to have some level of struggles. And Mobley's offense hasn't been great until he came back, but it's been really good. So they could really prove me wrong. They could lose in the first round. There's a lot of different scenarios with this Cavs team. I think they have a lot of potential. I think a lot of teams could make it out of the East. Like feels like
Yeah.
if from
It's
Sixers
open
up,
for sure. Yeah.
if the Sixers are healthy, Sixers, Cavs, Knicks, Bucks, Celtics, feels like they could all make a run of some sorts. Some smaller trades. I have literally no opinion on the Schroeder to the Nets trade. I guess Schroeder is better than Dinwiddie, so I get why the Nets did it, but the Raptors just got Dinwiddie, then release him. I don't even, maybe it's for Schroeder's money next year. I don't understand. I really don't understand. I saw a joke that's like, it's like when the computer in 2K makes a trade with the other, computer team. It's just like random, not a bad trade, but doesn't really help either team. We saw Pat Bev go to the Bucks. Sad to see him go for a second round pick. They get some point of attack defense, some leadership, some hustle, which they desperately need. I could see him being a big part of their playoff rotation, to be honest. Still very worried about the Doc Rivers situation, but I do think that's a pretty reasonable addition because he might be their best perimeter defender, besides, I guess, Giannis, who you don't really want to use in that role for the entire game. James Springer, the Sixers, young developing prospect for a second round pick to the Celtics. Kind of a weird trade. Not sure exactly what either team gets or loses from it. Um, Robin Lopez to the Kings to duck the tax. Kind of sad to see the brothers get split apart. And then the Raptors, this is a kind of interesting trade. They trade for Kelly Olynyk, a good stretch big who can do a little bit of everything, and Ochai Agbaji, a former lottery pick in the Donovan Mitchell trade, just in his second year, a bit older for a second year player, but I think he still has a ton of potential and a pretty high floor. And all they had to give up was Otto Porter, Kyra Lewis, and a first round pick that I looked into, and it appears it will almost certainly not be any pick outside the 25 to 30 range. So really not much for a couple good, intriguing players that I think could help the Raptors out this year and especially in the future with the case of Ochai Agbaji. And then Monte Morris was traded to the Timberwolves. I think he could give them some good guard depth. Xavier Tillman from the Grizzlies to the Celtics, some good big man depth, and that's really it. Not a huge trade deadline in terms of star trades, but a lot of trades that I'm like, oh, I could see this helping the other team or one of the teams out in a playoff series. So, those are mostly my thoughts. Any big takeaways from the trade deadline, Griff?
Yeah, I mean, I think, looking at across the whole span, like the Knicks did well, man. Like they didn't give up a first round pick and they acquired, Anunoby, Bogdanovich, and Alec Burks. I mean, that's a really great job by it's Leon Rose still in charge,
Leon
right?
Rose,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The guy who doesn't speak to the media. Yeah, I think it's a great move that they made. They got a roster. Like I've been hard on the Knicks, partly because I like to kind of poke fun at Knicks fans, but also because I kind of just don't think they're good enough. But you know, I'll be honest. Like this is a team that they can put up a fight in the playoffs. I don't know if they can go and get on a run and go win the finals. I still think, as great as Brunson is, that they just need someone else. Like, or just it's just he's not good enough. It's kind of the same problem the Cavs have. Like, I think the Cavs and Knicks are both in really good spots. I mean, you see how the Cavs are playing. You touched on it. Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, pretty similar at this point in their career where they're at. Like maybe a favor Mitchell a little bit, but I don't even know. They're both really good players. But are they good enough to win a championship? We'll have to see. But I really like the moves they made. I mean, you know, Ananobi's out, I know, with like an elbow thing right now, but you bring in Bogdanovich, like you said, 20-point scorer, Alec Burks, a guy who's, been there with Thibs before, I believe, and so he knows the system. It shouldn't be too hard of a transition back for him. Um, and there's a lot of guys playing well on this team. Like Dante DiVincenzo has been absolutely killing it. Obviously, Brunson's hurt a little bit. Randall's hurt right now too, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're dealing with some injuries, but still playing really good basketball. And I think once this team gets the full health, once we start seeing a lineup of, whether it be Brunson, if they keep DiVincenzo in there, if they go, Bogdanovich and Anunoby, Randall, and then who is Mitch Robinson still the starting center?
No, he's hurt. It's
He's
been
hurt.
Hartenstein who's been playing really
Okay.
well.
But is Mitch out for the year or could he come back?
50-50 as of
50-50.
right now,
Okay.
yeah.
So regardless, I mean Hardenstein's played pretty well. So yeah, the Knicks got a freaking squad and they got some depth too. So very exciting time for Knicks fans. Um Kind of other than that, I mean, like you said, not too crazy. Sixers were pretty involved. I mean, I think the Buddy Hield deal is a good one for them. Mr. Keys to the City, Marcus Morris, unfortunately out the door. Um, but obviously the Embiid injury, he underwent surgery, so it's kind of unclear what his status will be going forward. Probably comes back, but you never know with some of these things. You got to see how he responds. So yeah, I mean their season is gonna hinge on him no matter what. So it kind of doesn't really matter until he's back. Um, and then, you touched on kind of some of the other ones. Gordon Hayward, a good pickup. The Mavericks made some good moves. Pat Bev to the Bucks, kind of a fun move. Pat Bev at this point kind of going everywhere. Shout out Pat Bev, man. They got him and Rowan from Barstool. They got a great podcast, Pat Bev Pod. Good listen if you're looking for NBA podcast, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean that's kind of all I got. I think you know obviously we're getting really close now to the All-Star week. It's got to be like
Next weekend.
next week. Yeah. So little break we'll have, and obviously, I think this is kind of one of the major midseason storylines. So we'll see how some of these moves, uh, progress, and at this point for some of these teams, it's just health. Like you got to stay healthy and make the push to the playoffs, and we'll see if the West is super close at the top. I mean, there's one seed still to be decided. Seems like the Celtics should get the one seed. Cleveland, I think, is 5 games out, so they got a pretty good hold on that. But anything can happen. One injury, and just like that, a new team is at the top. So it should be a fun rest of the regular season. I think this year in the NBA is fun because it feels like there's not that clear one big team that's going to go win it all. I think in both leagues, we're really yet to see and yet to know who's going to win. I mean, I think the Celtics probably are in the best position to win the finals right now, but uh, I feel like we also say that every year. So we'll see how it turns out. I don't know if you got anything else. That's all I got on the NBA.
Just one quick thing, like when was the last time a team won a championship without a guy who was like a top three player that year?
Yeah,
That's my only thing that I think is important for people to remember is it's really hard to win a championship, and it's even harder unless you have one of the absolute best players in the world. And like we talked about with the Knicks, like we talked about with the Celtics, like do they like as good as those guys are? It's like is
I think
Mitchell
Tatum
top?
is. I think Tatum's probably good enough to be at this point. I think he
No,
probably is.
I agree. I just think there's very few teams you don't have to ask that question for,
Yeah,
and it's an interesting one to answer. Besides that, I'm ready to close out if you are.
I got one
Go
real
ahead.
quick thing. I think, and this is college football. Chip Kelly leaving UCLA to go become Ohio State's offensive coordinator. I think it's super. I think it was a super interesting move. Obviously, it's good for Ohio State, but seeing a head coach of like a Power Five program like a UCLA, obviously his name was kind of on the hot seat. He might have just done this to save himself from being fired. But seeing, a guy like that first year that UCLA was going to be in the Big Ten and just leave to be a coordinator, I think it's really interesting and just kind of shows what's going on and how hard it is to be a college football coach. I think you look at all the shit that's going on with NIL, you have to deal with recruiting. Like college football head coach is, it's a lot of responsibility. It's probably a much tougher job than an NFL head coach, obviously in different facets, but the schedule, you're constantly recruiting, constantly traveling. And now with all this NIL, I mean, guys are just up and out of these programs at the drop of a hat. So really interesting move. Obviously, I'm not going to get in depth on it or what it means for the Ohio State offense. I just more wanted to bring it up as I think it's super interesting about where we stand at in college football that head coach at UCLA, Power Five program about to join the Big Ten, just up and leaves to be the offensive coordinator. I think it's pretty interesting. But that's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean yeah, college football and college sports in general are going to change a lot over the next few years. And I'm really
Yeah,
fascinated to see, whether I think one thing about college sports is the coaches are kind of the star more than the players a little bit. And I
yeah,
wonder if that sort of starts to flip a little bit.
a little,
Or it
yeah,
can flip the other way where the coach is the most valuable thing because the player can leave at any point, and the coach, if you have a coach, they're going to stay there unless they will go to a bigger school. So could go a variety of different ways. I think they'll make some changes sort of back to more what it
yeah.
was.
They
At
got to
some
make
point.
some change. It's a
They gotta
mess
make
right
some
now.
they gotta make some changes for sure. It's very stressful to be a college coach right now. Do not envy them. Um,
But they
yeah,
also make like $6-8 million, and
that's
that's like
true.
a low level. So I don't feel too bad for
I
him.
don't feel bad, but I would much rather be a college offensive coordinator like Chip Kelly than a coach right
Yeah,
now. I understand his
100%.
decision. Other than that, great episode. I'm really excited for the Super Bowl, like we talked about. Um, Trade deadline, this is sort of when we start to see the NBA teams start to say, all right, this is what our playoff rotation is going to look like. Sorry, 11th guy, you don't get to see the court anymore. Play their stars, 38 to 40 minutes as opposed to 35, whatever, just a little bit more, which is really fun as we get closer to the playoffs. The seeding gets intense. We'll have some fun, this game, if they win, they could be the 2 seed. If they lose, they could be in the play-in, like stuff like that. So exciting to see how, the NBA just ramps up more and more as the season goes along. Baseball, like you said, will be starting soon. Pitchers and catchers reporting at least within what, like a week or so.
Like, yeah, 3-4 days. Yeah.
So excited for that. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, whatever you want to do at this point. And we will see you next week on Outside the Arena.